And we are live. Mr. Jack, thanks for coming on the
Logan?
line today, man.
Absolutely.
Oh, we've been working together for almost 5 years. A morning call is pretty commonplace for us, but a recorded call, a podcast kind of a call, is somewhat unique. We've done a little bit of that over the years.
Yes. Hopefully more common moving forward. I think this
Indeed,
is something we both like to start doing more
no doubt
regularly,
about
at least.
that. Something we talked a little bit about is this idea floating around the startup ecosystem of build in public and document, don't create. I wonder if we could unpack that, or at least our interpretation of those terms that are borderline cliche if they haven't already become cliche.
Absolutely. Um, you want me to start?
Please.
Yeah. So, I personally love the whole idea of building in public. I think, when so many people think about recording content or, wanting to share about their business, it does come from a place that is heavily scripted, heavily pre planned, and almost doesn't feel very real, both in topics and you know, to the current state of someone's business. So I think that there's a lot of value. I know I definitely prefer watching content that is a little bit more true and real, and saying like, hey, you know, follow along with me, right? This is what I'm currently doing right now. This is you know real world stuff. So I also think that to anybody else, anybody watching, that if they are interested in sharing their perspective, kind of starting to create some content for themselves, for their business, it really is kind of the best approach to do that with. Just to be open, honest. People want to relate, right? So I think that's the best we can do, to make content where we're openly sharing. Hey, this is what we're working on. These are the things that we're thinking about in real time as we're running a business. Um, and this is what we're working on. These are the tools and stuff that we're excited about. Talking about trends, um, talking about situations with current clients, or talking about building products. I think it's exciting and interesting to other people that are, you know, walking in the same shoes. So that would be my initial sort of perspective on the whole build in public approach.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing, man. Hmm. The 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 problems that we're working to solve, I think, is an interesting area for us to explore beyond the build in public concept, sharing the journey as we go type of a thing. It a lot of times it seems like there's a veneer over startup or entrepreneurial content messaging. A lot of um, media sources in that ecosystem put a polish or a veneer on it, and at best, and at worst, it can be very heavily leaned towards this flashy, oftentimes unattainable lifestyle that is filled with promises and void of on the fulfillment. Um,
That's
and
accurate.
right, take my course and earn 60K a month. It rings a bell, right?
Right.
The course gurus. Not to say they're the only players in the entrepreneurial game, of course, but they're just probably the most characterized version of that.
And when it comes to content, let's be real, everybody's trying to sell something, right? So
True.
it'll come across as, look how well I'm doing it.
Yeah.
It's super easy. You can do it too, right? So this sort of salesy, shtick.
Yeah.
So I'd agree with that.
The problems are often aren't articulated in a very clear, unfiltered, down to earth way that's relatable. It can be this fight or flight inducing thing that's like, pushing urgency and scarcity on you for their offer. But something you mentioned was issues with clients. anyone who's a service provider has encountered some degree of that. I would wager, and if you haven't, maybe you just work with a few more clients, and it's bound to happen at some point.
Or you're insanely lucky.
Yeah, or you're insanely
An
lucky.
outlier. Yeah.
We started listening to a book recently. What is it, Jack? Built to Sell.
Yes. Yes.
Business
Great
fiction.
book.
We described it internally between ourselves as cathartic.
Yeah. A little too relatable.
Too relatable. Uh,
Almost therapeutic.
Seriously. Why was that? And what was the even it was in the first chapter, first two chapters of that guy's
Yeah.
story. What was that?
Yeah.
The-
Working with a client that speaks with, the air of expertise in something that
right.
you literally only do day in, day out, right? Asking for revisions, saying, stress, making, changes over very small details just because they want to have that feeling of input, right? It can certainly feel like that, at least some way. So,
No doubt.
I think most people can relate to that, right? Having a client that is high demand, highly scrutinous, and wants to make changes just so they're dictating, what's being created.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a power play.
Yes. Exactly.
And I love
Exactly.
that saying from Steve Jobs, I believe it is. He goes, "We don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do."
Yeah. If only more people, you know, had that mantra, right?
No doubt.
Um, because I mean that's so true, right? It's you're if you're spending the money for a specialist, I mean the best thing you can do is let them do what they do, right? It's the whole reason that you hired them, right? Otherwise, why waste the money on a specialist and just hire somebody to do whatever you tell them,
Hmm.
right? The way that you want to.
No doubt. It that takes a lot of careful communications in those situations, right? Because on the one hand, revenue generation, revenue retention is very important. Customer satisfaction is important. All of this, and there's a line somewhere there, or a gradient in there, which is at what point is it values misalignment? At what point is it detracting from the health of the team, the health of the company, and at what point? And it's like if that's at one extreme, you know, then when is it just okay? This is a difficult client. So
Yeah,
those lines in the sand aren't always apparent. You kind of have to feel them out, and sometimes it feels like okay, this is toxic. This is you got to push back, and other times it's like okay, grin and bear it, smile, be polite, be the professional.
right.
Um, Leveraging judgment and a good judgment and discernment, I think, is probably the best way to determine that, and ultimately look for better clients. Look for clients that have a real values alignment, and that you can actually that actually share a vision, and for that there's a reciprocal vision. What you are contributing to their vision contributes to yours. Maybe that's overly idealistic, but I think that's the goal, at least. That's the North Star for professional services, is to pursue the real customers that are aligned with your avatar.
Yeah, I think that's at least something to strive for, right? Even if it's not always attainable, right? I think everyone will always have customers, clients that do fall into the former, right? And we hope that it's not, a customer base or clientele that's, uh, you know, that you're dependent upon, right? Just to tie back to the book, right? It's this guy. If he had the choice, it's like, man, I wouldn't be working with it, but my business depends on it. It's my largest contract,
Hmm.
largest partnership. Um, but I think even from a, you know, not even from a maintaining an engagement or a loyal customer base, we as business owners, I think it can be easy to lose sight of it as time goes on, but we genuinely do want to help the people that share our vision, right?
Hmm.
We want to make a difference, right? Of course, we want to be successful and make money, but I like to think that the majority of business owners, entrepreneurs, really do want to make a difference for people to see the value in what they're doing and get excited the same way they do, right? For the reason that they built their business.
It's getting into the mind of the customer, psychographics within an avatar, as an example, um, and clarifying the internal problems that they have and the drivers that they have for decision making and taking action is not an easy thing to do. In service design, what do they call that, Jack? Service safari, or maybe that's not right. Something to do with empathy. Um, but
Yeah,
put
well,
a day in the life type of a thing where you're trying to leverage empathy and put yourself in the shoes of the end user.
yes,
It's not easy.
definitely not. Uh, we always like to think we know, but it's a constant learning game,
No doubt.
right? It's very easy to say, "Hey, I'm the business owner, I'm the marketer. I know what the problem is. This is the way that I see it." But you know, sometimes your greatest demographic is not the one that you necessarily figured, or perhaps they see their problem through a different lens, right? And what you are describing might be the real problem, but they don't really see it that way, right? Um, what they might be seeing is the symptoms of a larger problem and not seeing the larger picture that you're trying to tell them. So I think, at the end of the day, we want to be speaking to the way that they feel, and, not to what we think they need or even know that they need.
Good point. I think that's where things like jobs to be done is helpful. But even beyond that, it's like if you're solving a problem that you have yourself, I think we've seen that reflected in a lot of like source material for best practices for startups. I'm thinking
Yeah,
Strategizer. I'm thinking Steve Blank, customer development, Eric Rees, Lean Startup. That camp and Y Combinator. These places, I think, oftentimes I've heard it echoed in many different places if to solve your own problem. I mean, that's the one you know the best.
yeah,
And there's more to it than that. Um, but if you're the one that's really struggling with the problem and the pre-existing solutions don't don't live up to what you believe needs to be done, like Don Miller says, if there's a philosophical level issue, it shouldn't be
yeah,
that way, type of a thing. Um, then it seems like the empathy exercise is easier because you inherently understand what some of what the end user, your customer segment is going through, since you are your customer.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it also is uh, a piece of the proof that it is something worth sharing with the world, worth selling. Is if you yourself built something out of necessity, chances are other people see it as a necessity as well. Whether or not you can articulate why, right? It's one of those things that to everyone else is an unknown because they didn't discover it and make it themselves, right? Um, and I think just to tie back in, when I think of like the different types of pain points and problems, right? Just to tie back to Don Miller, there's the internal problems, which is kind of the personal, more emotional problems. The external, which is kind of like the problem on the table, right? Kind of like bare bones, like literal, right? Like this is the issue. But what you touched upon there was the philosophical, and more and more, I think that that's really probably one of the more important ones. Maybe because just it's not touched upon that much, but that feeling of it shouldn't have to be this way. There's another way. Why is this so difficult? Why am I struggling with this? Right. That's really to me where, you know, a lot of that, empathizing with really how someone thinks uh, comes into play. And of course, all three important to touch upon. Right.
Yeah.
You want to cover your bases. You want to speak to people on different levels as well. Um, but I think that that one is definitely important.
That's right. It's a nice combination to have Don Miller's internal, external, or external, internal philosophical problem set with strategizer's value proposition, um, gains, pains, jobs to be done, or specifically the pains. If you can kind of fuse those, they pair nicely together, I think.
Definitely.
When you and I were uh, starting to work together back in 2019, 2000, early 2020, the frustration that we encountered was we had Google Sheets, Docs, slides, chat, email, website, project management, CRM, email campaigns, and automation software, social media, scheduler, video editor, graphic design software, and it goes on and on. There's many more to it than that, but there's a ton of pieces to the puzzle, and it felt like not only having to learn all of those, but it's like the technology was was it was kind of mirrored by the functions and the processes. On the one hand, there's the website or the landing pages, but then there's also the lead generation process and nurturing process and sales process. So there's the activities that pair with the the physical evidence or those capabilities. So there was a scattered array of things that didn't really seem to be connected in any visible way. The only connection point existed in our heads, and I think that background processing was demanding. And um, when we got the opportunity to go back to the drawing board to pivot away from the original concept of a computer vision based uh, fitness training platform, when we lost the angel investment opportunity, we lost the tech partner opportunity, COVID lockdowns were full swing, March, April 2020. You and I found ourselves staring at a blank whiteboard, literally, maybe a Miro board, but something like this, and saying, let's start over from scratch. And one of the big pains that I think we had before that was the array of disparate technology and requirements and tasks and just managing that constellation of stuff that it takes to get a startup off the ground.
I mean, it's very well said. Um, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people if they're listening that probably uh, either went through similar things or at least had the disruptions of when the pandemic hit and things going on pause and having that time to reflect and all of that. And speak on something else you said. When you're a small team, right? When you're a startup, um, the smaller the team, the more that you are directly responsible for, right? A business owner is responsible for the entirety of their business, but there's some help, right, in managing the different pieces. The smaller your team, and in some cases, right, there's solopreneurs, right, you're literally responsible for every single piece of the business you're building for yourself. Um, and keeping that in your head is, I mean, one, it's not ideal. Second, it's frankly dangerous, right? There's a lot of risk to that. And the way I see it, and I think the way that you saw it too, probably was if everything is separated, and each of the different subjects of the business, or functions rather, um, are all kind of contained and managed within their own separate platforms and stuff. It's not like literally they're disconnected, but on a platform level, they quite literally are disconnected, right? It's kind of happening behind the scenes and stuff. Um, you know, I think you and I were always systems thinkers, right? We wanted to clearly see everything that was on the table, have a place to manage it all, um, because it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to do a as a small team, as a if someone's a solopreneur. Um, there's a lot to keep track of, and if you want to build something optimal and efficient, you know, trying to solve things in their own bubbles is not an effective way to do that, right? You need to see how everything integrates together and how the system works as a whole to be able to effectively refine it and make something that uh, truly worthwhile.
Well said. I know there's a number of pieces that are not represented. Give me a couple that come to the top of your mind.
Let's see what you got here so far.
You got elements of a business: strategy, marketing, tech platforms, stakeholders, value streams, processes, sales, customer development and discovery, organization, journeys, brand, project management, SOPs, recruiting,
Ads,
advertising,
ads or marketing, website, SEO,
funnels, social
content marketing.
content marketing,
Yeah, there you go.
cold outreach.
Customer experience or user experience.
And something we've talked about a lot. One of my favorite quotes from Alan Dibb's book, The One Page Marketing Plan, is that what you don't know will hurt you. You think even if you are aware that all of these elements exist, and I think anyone who is a seasoned entrepreneur would see these things and think, of course, and probably be able to point out pretty quickly on the stuff that we've missed in 30 seconds of drafting out, these elements. But you think
Yep.
that the Alan Dibb says what you don't know will hurt you. The big question that we ask our clients in our strategy sessions and in our implementation projects is, when we do something like this, which one of these are elements are we ultimately responsible for as a business owner? And that's one of the first questions we'll ask. And every time, I've never had a entrepreneur that's a business owner say anything other than scoff and say all of it. 100% of this is ultimately our responsibility as a business owner. Now, that's not to
Yeah.
say we can't delegate. That's not to say we can't automate. We have to, in fact, but to scale and to grow. But just because you delegate something doesn't mean it's not your responsibility. I think Jocko, everyone's favorite Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, helped us learn that with extreme ownership. But it's like, okay, you know that you're responsible for these elements, but and to varying degrees. Not everyone is a savant with marketing or
Right.
stakeholder
Right.
management or processes or customer discovery, sales. It's like, you have varying depths of competency, of proficiency within each element, and differing uh, understanding. Like even within a team, you may understand customer journeys differently than other people do, than the industry does. We've seen that firsthand with project management. Um, for example, some people have a very um, unique interpretation on what project management is. That would be a very sharp departure from what is very commonplace in the industry. What, for example, the Project Management Institute would define as project management. Some people just make up their own meanings, as an example. So, not only is there
Yeah.
variable depth of understanding to each element, there's also this variable like interpretation. People kind of just can understand differently what strategy means for their own business, and that's a complexity point that we've encountered. But there's also the thing of you don't know everything. No matter how good you get, there's always components that you won't know within the stuff you do know. You know, but for example, SEO, you could study it for years and still not know everything about it, and that's just one node that has unknowns. But there could be entire other nodes, entire other elements that you have no idea about, you've never heard about. And a prime example is service design. You and I were trying to map out end to end a customer journey with everything baked into it for like a year, 2 years, until we just so happened to stumble upon this massive discipline of service design, which is globally recognized, integrated into Fortune 100 organizations, taught in schools. There's postgraduate degree programs. Service design is a formal field. And people, designers who know about it, would laugh because it seems very commonplace for those of us who know about it. But you know, I, I had no idea that existed, and was trying to implicit a way together. We were trying to implicit a way to map out end to end from traffic channels to retention and referrals and everything, and reinvent that wheel. So that's one example that we can pull from our journey on the unknown variables and how they can hurt you. They can cause months of work trying to reinvent the wheel on something where there's been generations of professionals dedicating their entire careers to honing the craft and developing the body of knowledge or the body of work.
Yeah. Well said.
So we're talking about complexity and just stacking layer upon layer. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs we've met probably get glazed over eyes at this time and just say, all right, let's just get to work. Let's just start doing it. And this may seem very abstract and theoretical. And at the end of the day, if you need to work on your marketing, you don't really have to be a genius to do it. You don't need to get caught in analysis paralysis. You just need to make it happen. But um, the time and energy is a non-renewable commodity. Tim Ferriss says he's a champion for the idea of decision-making fatigue. And you can only, I've even heard Jeff Bezos talking about that, of making a few very good decisions per day. Now, as startup founders, we don't necessarily have that luxury. We have to do a lot of work, make a lot of decisions, etc. But one of the things that I realized early on, I think we both realized early on, is this complexity causes a lot of background processing in the brain. Because just to show up and make decisions, which are ultimately a prerequisite for acting, for doing the thing, you have to hold such a massive um, amount of context. It's like having 50 apps open on your computer or your phone, or trying to feed GPT a 300,000 word prompt just to have it do something else. You know, it's like maxing out the GPU capabilities, maxing out your CPU just to do the thing you really have to do. So it's eroding the quality of your performance is the bottom line. You following me so far?
I am. I'd say that's pretty accurate. Um, you know, I think anybody that isn't doing that is doing a great disservice to their business, right? Not considering all of the interconnectedness or tangential effects of making a decision in one place, because we all know you can't just decide something's in one area. It's going to have a multitude of effects across the organization, right?
Now, there's no way to get out of some level of, like, there's no way to get out of sales, as an example, or marketing or strategy as a startup founder. Like, you have to know it to some extent. Ideally, you're always learning and getting better at it. I mean, you're always doing it until, you know, and even if you as an individual aren't doing it, the organization is always doing it. So it's like there's no way out of that, but there is some way to get support to alleviate some of the burden on the integration piece. Because ultimately, sales is connected to marketing, as an example. And customer discovery, customer development is directly connected to how we frame our, how we represent ourselves, how we structure our offers, how we build our brand, what our website looks like, the type of content we put out that's SEO optimized, the type of content, the things we do in our cold outreach, the sales funnels. It's how we speak about ourselves when we're recruiting a team. And then that touches into strategy. So overall business strategy and models contextualized with the environment, and that speaks to how we're driving sales and developing processes. So the real wearisome thing is not just knowing these nodes, it's knowing how all of this comes together. I think that is the the leak, so to speak, in the hole. If we're using a boat analogy, it's like you're always bailing out water because you have to think, okay, how are my ads driving the top of funnel? And how is the funnel opt-in driving into a nurture sequence and retargeting ads? But how does that coexist with what we're doing in cold outreach and what we're doing with content marketing? And how does our referrals and SEO integrate with all of that? So that array, that constellation is only connected in the minds of the individuals. There's no single source of truth. That term has become very in vogue, is very stylish for these apps to say a single source of truth. Notion, ClickUp, Asana, I'm looking at you, and I love those apps, but to get those things to become a single source of truth, there's like 50 pages. Even in ClickUp,
Yeah.
as an example, they say one app to rule them all. They say it's the last app you'll ever need. You've got tasks and projects and team chat and docs and automations and timeline views and Kanban views and whiteboards. There's dozens of different screens to get that, quote, one source of truth. Same thing with Notion. Fantastic tool. Love the tool. But you got, again, projects and tasks and wikis and uh, and pages within pages all the way down the rabbit hole. So again, it's the fractal sort of thing where if you're looking at one level of the picture, you're not seeing how it actually connects to other levels. You're only able to see one thing at a time. So it doesn't
Right.
solve the actual problem of this background processing demand on an entrepreneur. And that, in my mind, is one of the biggest problems I faced as a founder years ago that drove us to say, how can we get everything in one place, like truly one place? How can we map it out?
Yeah, and to touch upon what you said, not just for the sake of having it in one place, on one domain, on one platform, right? But to literally see how it all works together, how it is connected, to have, not just a high level overview, but down to the details, right? Um, because I mean, like you said, right? It's like, okay, yeah, a lot of these platforms can do all these things, but you're only using one aspect at a time, right? And it's great, but it doesn't really accomplish what I think a lot of people idealize in their mind by that sort of single source of truth or that all in one platform kind of idea, right? It's like technically that's true, but it doesn't conform to the expectations of that phrase, right? Of hearing that. right? Of what people really want when they say something like that.
Hmm. No doubt, no doubt about that. I think the that was the spark that ignited a obsession towards solving the problem, because on the high level, on its head, it seems like a relatively easy thing to do. It's like, okay, let's map out our business, some sort of dashboard, some sort of all-in-one type of a thing. And in fact, I haven't spoken to a business owner, maybe actually a few, who are more, you know, all they do is network and build relationships, but that's sort of different. That's like a broker. But even they have
Yeah,
use cases for something like this. But almost every business owner at different industries, different levels of scale, different backgrounds, want some way to see the whole thing, to have the big picture overview. I just saw the movie Napoleon, and I imagine Napoleon standing on the hill looking down at the battle. It's like you and
right.
directing it, right? You want that, seeing the forest through the trees. So we started attempting to do that, and realized very quickly it's not easy. That mapping out a business is actually quite difficult, uh,
Yeah,
because of the fact that there's so much going on, which is why massive, very successful, well established companies with hundreds or thousands of sophisticated, educated experts, such as ClickUp, Asana, and others, Notion, have the structure that they have. That's ultimately what they've landed on, because it's the most accessible to the end user and ultimately comprehensive, in order to capture as much as possible in a single place. And so my point is, producing a venture map is not for the faint of heart. At least it wasn't several years ago, and even up to this time last year, it still was not for the faint of heart. It's
certainly not building the concept.
inventing it from without much reference material, no doubt.
Yeah,
I alluded earlier that a lot of the A type, action oriented business owners we've known have very little taste for this sort of discussion, business theory, that's all in the prefrontal cortex. A lot of them get antsy with 5 to 10 minutes of talking at this level, much less 30 minutes, and they just want to start executing and start doing it. And I think that the idea of bias towards action is wise. It's well received. I agree with that. I respect it. But I think it doesn't. It presents a risk of over. It's of really a burnout in the long term, and wasted effort in the short and medium term. Because
yeah,
if you put a little bit more intent, not analysis paralysis, intent behind what you're doing, it reduces wasted time, energy, resources, and it allows for a compounding effect, because then you're able to build upon your previous efforts in a way that is scalable, in a way that when you finally do make it as a business owner, you've got a head count around 15, 20, 30 people, you're doing 7 figures a year. The entire thing isn't barely holding on by you working 16 hours a day, and half the team doesn't know what they're doing. The other half is demoralized because all you do is crack the whip, and everything exists inside of your head and is duct tape and patched and super glued, and a few weeks away from complete ruin. And because you're almost burned out, and everything is just a patchwork. That's the outcome we've seen more times than we can count, for taking the leaning too far into the bias towards action at the expense of taking a little bit more time for intent, and planning, documenting, and being ultimately very strategic.
well said. I think that also kind of ties into taking a little bit more of a scientific approach, an evidence based approach, right? Um, I would say maybe that's not the other side of the coin towards that bias towards action, but it's definitely leaning in the other direction where it's, hey, we want to ensure that when we do execute, it's done in the most effective way possible. That when things inevitably do, not necessarily go wrong, but when things change, that we're prepared and that we're gathering insights along the way. And like you said, to not create something that's like, this is working, right? But to constantly be refining and working towards something that is functioning well, that is optimized and streamlined.
Well said. Everybody's favorite um, ancient Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu has a quote that you and I have referenced on a weekly basis. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. On the one side, you imagine a hobbyist luxuriating in the abstract. There's nothing wrong with hobbies, but it's completely different than business. And it's the ivory tower analysis paralysis. Oh, it's the bean counter mentality. Um, like Sun Tzu says, slowest route to victory. Tactics before strategy. This is what we've been talking about. This is the Tasmanian devil style entrepreneur. It's the noise before defeat. Whether you're defeated by the market, defeated by internal chaos, like high employee churn, as an example, that's one of the most pervasive issues we've observed in small to medium-sized businesses around that 30 head count, between 1 and 4 million, primarily in the service industry, service-based businesses, B2C, that type of beast, which a lot of the small SMB ecosystem is composed of. That's a issue, is talent, is team retention, team development. And there's a lot we could unpack there, perhaps in another discussion, but that's really what we've been leveraging, is Sun Tzu's insights of tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And I would add to that by saying even the large, earlier we were talking about the elements of a business and how there's unknown variables. What you don't know will hurt you, as Alan Dibb says. And there's unknown variables within things As an example, SEO is just one that's off the top of my head. You could have a high level cursory insight to what that is, right? Third grade reading level understanding. You could have a multi-year understanding. You could have a multi-decade understanding. So there's depths of proficiency, of competency, of expertise, and it's probably close to an endless rabbit hole. Same with all of this. Every single one of these things is a rabbit hole. It's a fractal in and of itself. But we also talked about this layering dynamic where there's this distortion or this personal interpretation that happens to each segment and combinations of segments. And to that end, strategy is one of those that's almost always has a flavor of the month or a unique sort of interpretation in the minds of a business owner. There's not really, if you got 100 business owners lined up and asked each of them to define strategy for you, my experience would lead me to suggest you would get almost 100 different descriptions.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think what we've had firsthand knowledge of, firsthand experience of, is most business owners, most entrepreneurs think that they are strategists.
Yes, above all else.
Above all
Right.
else. And they believe that if they don't have the exposure to things like evidence-based entrepreneurship and testing and validation and iterative cross-functional type of stuff, if they haven't been exposed to that, and we touched on that humility point earlier, it's telling smart people what to do versus asking them what they think we should do. If and that There's a pretty significant cohort of those types of leaders in the world who think that their strategy is the best strategy because it came from them and everyone needs to follow it. Kind of old school industrial revolution, tops down hierarchy style. Um, that like their strategies are inscrutable type of a thing. So it's difficult to come to them, that type of thinker, and say, well, we need to revise the strategy. We need to iterate the strategy. In fact, we've got to hammer this, even not even revise or iterate, but we have to hammer it out in a way that everyone can understand. Um, and that's been a choke point, I think, for this work over time as we've scaled it with other business owners, but even with ourselves, getting it down in front of you is a lot more difficult than just saying, "All right, here's what we got to do: make this happen, make that happen," which is kind of the
100%.
simple way of simple way to frame up what I'm sharing here.
Very well said.
It's easy to be the strategist that just shows up and tells people what to do. It's easy to be the strategist that
Yeah.
just scribbles it down, in a manic fit the night before on a notepad, show up the next day and act like you've got it all together and just command and delegate and tell people what to do. That's not being a strategist. That's really being more of a tactician. That's just calling the shots. And there's room for that. We've talked about the difference in other discussions of emergent strategy and deliberate strategy. And
Mm.
ultimately, the best strategy in the world, as it operationalizes down into a tactical context, down into the place where you're at the task level doing it, like the Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan to get punched in the face. Or even the best plans don't survive first contact with the market. Um, it's like, no matter how amazing your strategy is, we're kind of poking the eye of people who don't take time to clarify their intent, document the strategy, get real clear on what they're trying to achieve in multiple levels. We're kind of poking that button here, but what's interesting is intrinsic to that. Even if you invest and you get real solid and real clear on the strategy, at the end of the day, it's a lot of it is going to fail when it operationalizes, and that's just the nature of it. Um, it's going to have to adapt. Uh,
Yeah. Fail or change,
right.
right? Whether that's by design or not, right? Nothing, it's very rare that something will pan out 100% exactly like the initial strategy, or at least stay, you know, to that strategy over time.
There's a great image that you and I've referenced a few times. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but it's it's a great way to depict how people see things uh, in their own way. I guess I don't know if I'm going to go find it, Jack. How the sales guy
Mm.
sold it. How the customer development, or how
Yes.
the developers engineered it. What the customer actually wanted, and every single image is completely different. It's a tire swing. The sales guy sold it as a roller coaster. The engineer developed just a rope hanging from a tree. Customer success, how the customer success supported it, nothing. It's absolutely nothing there. What the customer
Yeah.
wanted was just a straight up tire swing. And
And they all heard the same thing. They all said it back to each other, right?
exactly, that's right, man. They all said it back to each other. And that is, it's like, even at an individual level, I know some entrepreneurs are very much solopreneurs. They don't want to work with a team, and I get that. I think you and I understand that. But there's this issue where people interpret ideas, they interpret the world through a unique lens, and that's where strengths come from, but it's also where misalignments can occur. As we've thought about this, I think we've got, as a team, you and I have connected to the philosophical root of the problem in a way that has caused us to push a lot further than many others would. Others just say, "Oh yeah, just use Asana, whatever, just get it done. Just use the CRM, Asana, WordPress. We don't have time to do this in over strategizing, over intent is what they consider it. Let's just get into the environment and start executing." But I think you and I have been afflicted at a philosophical level and can't look past the problem. That's my view on it. That's why we've worked so hard on solving this, not necessarily with the intention of selling the venture map, but of having a venture map, leveraging it for
Yeah.
ourselves. Because we see a picture that says the principles underlying human endeavor. Elon Musk has brought the first principles thinking to the forefront over recent years. But if you look at the principles of human endeavor, in business in this case, the stakes are generally high for something like a business. It's volatile. There's a lot of complexity. We talked about that a lot. Now, each of these things is constantly changing. As an example, just marketing, just social media is always changing. It's very volatile. There's a ton of uncertainty. We've touched on that. Depth of comprehension and proficiency is variable in each of these domains, and ambiguity. That's touching to incomplete information. So you're dealing with a foggy environment that's got a lot of interdependencies, a lot of moving pieces that are changing all the time, and then a lot of unknowns that there's high stakes in. Now, to solve these principles is a pretty daunting challenge. That's really the problem. We're at a we're talking about the philosophical level is what has afflicted us as founders over the years, when we've gotten down to a bedrock, I believe, kind of boring through to the bottom of it, and there's no current solution that solves this. ClickUp certainly doesn't do it. Go High Level certainly doesn't do it. No other tool, and there's even niche tools that are strategy execution platforms, and Trainual, as an example, is great for SOP documentation. Even like one of the champions of this sort of thinking, the guy from the E-Myth, he backs up Trainual, which is a fantastic platform, but it's one, maybe two sub nodes in the overall array. Thus, it doesn't actually solve the problem. So we hunted for a solution to these things, and we didn't find one. So we had to start scribbling out one for ourselves. We've talked about this in origin story discussions for years, but ultimately, we landed on. We had to look outside of business. We had to look outside the business domain to the military. Now, I've talked about this in other videos. My direct experience before moving into the fitness industry was in the Marine Corps, was in the infantry. And I mentioned earlier those principles are underpinning human endeavor. So not just business, they underpin military operations as well. Military operations are very easily categorized as high stakes, volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous, right? All those principles underpin military operations as well as business. So there's a commonality at that level. The difference is where there's no solution in the private sector. And I'm even talking about Peter Thiel's Palantir's Ontology, which does a fantastic job, and Accenture's Root platform. There's some that do a fantastic job moving in that direction that are inspiring, but still I hold the belief that there is not a solution to what we're talking about. in the private sector, but there is one that's been leveraged for generations in the defense arena, in the defense sector. And in fact, it's been used so it's such a commonplace tool. It's such a rudimentary tool that it goes under the radar. And it's one of those things that lends itself so effectively to an operational environment, to operationalizing a strategy, that considering it at a philosophical level is, is not doesn't people don't even. I've talked to a lot of grunts and a lot of infantry guys, even off, and the only people who I've connected with on this are typically officers, infantry officers. But thinking about a terrain model at a philosophical level doesn't usually happen in the community. They think about how to put together a terrain model and why we use a terrain model, but the philosophical underpinnings, the principles beneath it aren't really commonplace. It's just part of the culture, and it has been for literally generations. And we've got images that we could point to saying this isn't a unique tool to the military, it's a unique tool to humanity, to humankind, and has been used for thousands of years to visually depict the realities of an area of operations, all the way back to, you can imagine, a mammoth hunt and with Cro-Magnon era people. But we discovered this alignment where the problems at a principles level are the same, but the solution to have a holistic overview of the realities in the area of operations, a terrain model in the military realm, there's a solution there, but there's no equivalent solution in the private sector. So that on our hunt, on our quest, on our unfolding line of inquiry, we said, what would it look like to have a business terrain model? And that was the big question that led us to trying to map it out. And I'm trying to get to this point where it was more difficult than we imagined. I don't think we ever would have thought back in the days at Tech Runway, at the Startup Accelerator, that it would have taken us 4 years, over 4 years, to develop what we now have is a comprehensive, accessible venture map, platform, and methodology. I don't think I would have ever assumed that it would have taken that long and been as difficult as it was. Would you?
No, but we're talking about something very, very complex. Um, I mean, like you said earlier, to take it back to those sticky notes, right? It's very easy to look at that and be like, okay, I can count all those, right? I can see all those. There's about 30 buckets inside each one of those sticky notes,
Yes.
right? And if we truly want to visualize everything, not just at a high elevation, but to be able to zoom in and see literally what is involved at each and every step, processes, details, measurables, right? Because frankly, otherwise, it's just a nice to have to look at, right? It needs to be at a certain level of detail to where it's actually proving useful, right? And something else, you know, that I don't think we've really talked about in this discussion is the inherent usefulness of building it, right?
Yeah.
Of the mapping process,
Yeah.
not the okay, now that I have it. I mean, that is the goal, so you can actually use it. But in actually constructing this, you can see, it kind of lays bare the bones of your business, right? There's no hiding anything. There's nothing that's neglected or easy to not acknowledge. Um, and I think a lot of the times, when we're building these with clients, who at the start feel like, hey, okay, I already have, this stuff. I know how all this stuff works. Inevitably, there comes a time where all of a sudden we start getting, uh, I don't know,
Mhm.
or oh, I thought this is what we were doing, but yeah, we changed some stuff, or huh, we start to see a little bit more of that, and also, even if it's not that they didn't know, but when they see it all laid out, it's like, no, we really shouldn't be doing it this way now that I see it, right? Or we really should be doing this as well now that you bring it up, or now that I see that, the way this is all integrated together. So, um, and that's a benefit of having the thing completed as well, right? Because I think something that we recognize is business is a living thing. It's always moving, so it's never. I mean, it can be in a milestone state, but as your business grows, there's more to add to it. There's pieces that are always evolving, fluctuating, and changing. So it really is the best way to look at it. You know, like you said, like it's an area of operations, right? We need to have that top down approach to be moving the pieces, to be strategizing at that level. Um,
Mm.
and to tie it back to the philosophical again, I think one of the things that's really interesting. I know you've brought it up before, where right there, high stakes, livelihoods are on the line, right? That should be, I mean, just about as high stakes as it can get.
Mm.
Obviously, to the right there, probably is the highest it could get, right? Not livelihoods, but actual lives on the line, right? And it's interesting to think, like, is that really the only reason, the only differential that has caused this to not be built yet? Is the distinction between livelihood and literal life or death,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I mean, if you talk to any business owner, they want to say, yes, this is life or death. There's nothing that matters more. If that was really true, you'd probably be taking it as serious as the folks in the military who really know what life or death means. That, hey, we kind of have to do this because we
Yes.
can't afford not to,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
And I think when people see that, when we're building this and they realize, like, yeah, I can't afford not to do this.
Yes.
My livelihood, my quality of life is on the line, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not quite literally their life, but the equivalent of severity for a civilian, for a
Mm.
business owner, right? Um, so I think that that's just something worth pointing out is that, if you truly believe this is the most important thing, then there's no reason that you wouldn't be taking this level of, severity and caution and, you know, uh, this level of strategizing for your business.
Mm. Well said, man.
So, not the tangent off the course there, but I do think it is worth noting.
Very well said. Very well said. There's there's I'm glad you re-emphasized the stakes, and I think it's funny that you mentioned a lot of people, a lot of business owners come to the table with so much urgency,
Right.
getting
This is
everyone
my life.
right. There, and that oftentimes has a degrading effect on morale, on performance, on quality, uh, and actually overall, it has a degrading effect on the quantity output. You think someone the cliche cracking the whip manager, getting in there, pushing people, making it happen. We got to go chop chop. That type of thing causes mistakes, miscommunication,
Yeah.
and then we have to redo it. We have to fix bugs. So and then on top of that, you're losing people because you do that long enough, people are going to leave.
And not to mention, right? I mean, that's one side of the coin is mistakes, bugs, low quality work. But what's dictating that is low quality strategy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's not just that things aren't working as intended. Sometimes they are. But then, because it wasn't thought through,
Mm.
that manager, that leader will come back to the table and say, actually, I changed my mind. It needs to be like this.
And since there
And
was
that's almost worse
100%, 100%,
because now people have done exactly what you dictated, exactly the way that you told them. And they're being told, actually, no, it's this. I found out that it was this. And the team is sitting there thinking, why didn't we know that beforehand?
Yeah,
And the owner's saying, sorry, we have to move fast. We have to act fast.
that's just
We
how it
find these
is.
things out.
You're
Yes.
the worker bees. I'm the master strategist. You just do what you're told, basically. And we're overly characterizing a type of entrepreneur, though we have seen it in reality, and are
Of course.
speaking not from a place of imagination, but from a place of direct experience. Um,
I'm sure many can empathize.
I would imagine there's some out there who can relate. Um, and but another thing, Jack, there's the changing project requirements, to put a formal term to it.
Yes.
Um, at blistering speed of changing requirements. But since there's such a low priority and a devaluing of documentation and clarifying intent, like making intent explicit, visualizing it, right? It's like, hey, we don't have time to mess around. Just, send me, it's just do it. Just make it happen. Then once it's done, they change their mind, or they even forget what they talked about and make up something new because the mood is different. They missed their breakfast. They're running late. They completely change things. There's no like real single source of truth to go back and go, wait a minute, this is what we're doing. This is the project we're going through. These are the milestones we've set. This is the success criteria. These are the risks.
Yeah.
It's like that doesn't exist. So then it's like, okay, then you can't say, hey, this is a change in requirements. It's like, okay, we just got to do what we're being told at this point. And it's just all, that's where chaos, to put it into a word, that's chaos. That's
Yeah.
the situation we've seen many small business owners, like, I don't want to say most, but many small business owners living in.
Yeah. At some degree. Yeah.
Hmm. So, the I think we're reaching a place where we can put a bow on this conversation. I want to bring it home if I can. The the stakes are a really important part of this conversation, and it's very simple. Anyone who has any insight on the military understands that lives are on the line, especially for tactical operations and even in training, but primarily in an overseas environment. I've done 2 deployments to Afghanistan in the infantry, carrying a SAW squad automatic weapon, doing foot patrols through Helmand Province on my first deployment, as a rifleman doing helo assaults out of Camp Leatherneck on my second deployment. Um, I have a number of buddies that stayed in or in Marine Special Operations. My brother was in the Air Force as a TAC-P, did multiple combat deployments. So I have, I can speak from direct experience, not just from theoretical knowledge, on the fact that in reality, these things are used because they work. And we touched earlier about the difference in the way people interpret it, concepts. And in this environment, that's extremely dangerous. That's extremely risky. Because if you've got a guy, this dude here, if you've got one dude who has a different idea or an incomplete idea of what we're trying to accomplish and who's doing what, then one, he could commit the mortal sin of blue on blue, as Jocko would say, friendly fire, right? You're in a village somewhere raiding buildings. You see a bunch of guys with guns, silhouettes with guns in the building across the street. You have no idea that's the other squad. That could go real bad real quick. And there's case studies from Iraq, from Afghanistan that are cautionary tales to that effect. But even to a lesser extent, if this dude doesn't know what's happening and he's inside of this operating environment when they're making it happen, they're kicking down doors and doing the work, but he doesn't actually know where he's supposed to go, there's all sorts of, or what he's supposed to do, there's all sorts of ways that can go bad. That can lead to failure. That could lead to him not making it back, his buddies not making it back, or even if we just take the stakes, the severity of outcomes down, not shooting your buddies, not you dying or someone else dying. If you just take the severity down, it could lead to mission failure. If you've got to catch a bad guy in a certain building and you go to the wrong building, there's a higher likelihood that he's going to squirt out, as an example. So, alignment, team alignment is critical. Relevant common ground is critical. Having a situation where the minds are all aligned, where the mental image we have is as similar as possible. In the planning phase, in the strategy phase, we want to all get to a place where our cognitive grid coordinate is like a 10 digit. It's like, on Google Maps, you don't want to be at the continent level of alignment. You want to be like zoomed all the way in, because if this is the planning phase, when you leave the wire, when you're actually going out and you're leaving this mud terrain model, this cardboard terrain model, or you have something crazy like a holographic terrain model, doesn't matter the fidelity, but when you leave that planning phase, that strategy phase, into an operational environment, you're actually doing the work. In a lot of ways, the plan goes out the window and you move into that emergent strategy space. You think the bad guys are going to be here, they end up being here. Just because the plan says they were going to be in this side doesn't mean you're going to go to that if you're getting shot at from the other side. So in this context, it makes these concepts of a deliberate strategy and emergent strategy make perfect sense. The concept of the importance of relevant common ground make perfect sense. There's a lot, it's very relatable. It's very relatable because the military and the warrior society has been a part of human civilization since the dawn of time. When you get into an operational environment and you have to adapt as a team, if everyone has a slightly different, or God forbid, a greatly different idea of what they're trying to do in the first place and how they're trying to do it, and then everything changes, that's where chaos emerges. That's where grotesque inefficiencies are found, and where project failure or mission failure becomes much more likely. Now, contrast that with what a lot of people say it's like to operate in an infantry squad that's very well trained, very well experienced, or other tactical units. For example, Rangers and other tier 1 special operations groups and beyond, and all of that. It's like operating as an organism, a single organism. Best case scenario, that's the way it goes. Everyone's flowing together. There's a group flow, a shared mind. And when you're adapting, the communication is so consistent, the training is so well established, and the mindset, the mental grid coordinates were so clean and well anchored that when everything changes and the pivoting occurs, you're pivoting together as a group. That's why this is important. There's a saying in the military which is, plans are useless. Planning is invaluable. You talked about it earlier. The act of creating a venture map yields way more benefits than having it. And because of the insights it reveals, because of the alignment to the team that's working on it, it brings. But in the operating environment, when you have to adapt, everyone's adapting and pivoting from a shared place of origin. And that's one of the many benefits to leveraging this type of solution. The equivalent to a military terrain model is a venture map. And the venture map is an evolving discipline. It's an evolving methodology. The framework is significant. And it's something we have had the great fortune, to deploy in a number of businesses of different scales, different industries over the years, and something we're really proud of. I think what we should end on, Jack, is a little bit of our vision on the future, on how this can be accessible to any entrepreneur. It can be built for them, or at least built with them, and it can be done what used to take months and tens of thousands, and in some cases for those business owners who are on the scale trajectory and sell trajectory, who are working to sell their business, maximum engagement, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Historically speaking, that's really where we've built our business on, is fractional COO work, long implementation projects, long-term, super deep engagements to build these out. What we've been able to do is systematize all of that and present it in a platform capacity with boutique done with you services to build these out in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, done with you, where you don't have to get your hands dirty, so to speak, in Miro, moving the objects around. We just ask you questions and then you get the produced collateral, putting you truly in the commander's seat, getting all of the benefit with very little of the actual brute force labor to make it happen. To use the Hormozy offer sequence, maximum dream outcome, minimum time delay, minimum time effort and sacrifice, and what's the other one, Jack? I missed one.
Uh, I believe we've got it in the board. So
We do
let's
indeed.
see. Maximum outcome. Oh, just moved it. Should have this memorized by now.
Time to perceived likelihood.
Thank you.
Perceived
Yes.
likelihood.
Perceived likelihood of achievement.
Thank you,
Maximum
Alex
outcome.
Hormozy, for that. Right? It's a guarantee. It's like all you have to do is just answer questions in very clear sequences. We give you context. We present the context very specifically. We ask a question. You just rattle off your thoughts, and within a few days' time, you get back a component of your venture map, and we assemble the entire thing for you before your eyes. That's where we're at today.
Very well said. I think our mission has been to streamline and make this process as enjoyable as possible for people, because it is an enjoyable process. It is, I think people see the whole framework and it can be a little bit daunting, overwhelming, the scale of your business, trying to map out everything. But I mean, we've got this thing down to a science and we know what information we need from people. So if you can show up, answer some questions, speak organically about your business, right? Then we can build this out together. That we can do it in a way that's engaging, fun, that you have agency in, that you can see it come to life, that you can have influence on building, revising, editing it along the way. That, in a few short weeks, you can see a overview, a map, a blueprint of your business come to life. That is not just a something to look at, a schematic, but it's something that is actually actionable, right? Your strategy, your tactics, the moving components of your business with the market, um, and something we're super excited about. Making this more accessible, easier to accomplish, and you know, sharing this with more and more people. Like Logan said, we built this for ourselves, right? This was to solve our problem, and we know it's a problem. We know it's a pain point. So we want people to feel the difference, to see the value of having this for yourself and for your business.
I can't imagine a better way to wrap it up than that. Thank you, Jack. Been a pleasure connecting with you
Of
today.
course, man. Likewise, likewise.
Uh,
We'll do this again soon.
100%. Now, if you are interested in taking the next step towards getting one of these for yourself, there will be a link beneath the long form video here that'll take you to our website, venturemap.ai. We are accepting users for early access to this. We actually are based on the date of recording this video, we have a rolling cohort of case study clients. So what that means to you is you can actually get a venture map for free, and support the field testing of this methodology and share your feedback along the way. We anticipate open access to be coming later this year based on how things go, and the continued development as we roll through our case study cohorts. But if you'd like to take the next step forward, check out the website, submit the application, let us know you're interested. And besides that, I'd say we'll wrap here with thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the other side.